Welcome and thank you for listening. We are here at the MVO. It is December 4, 2019. My name is DK Roster. I am the Educational Outreach Coordinator, and we're going to be speaking with Jane Scarrow. She's a geologist at the University of Granada, Spain, currently based at the University of East Anglia, UK, with a Marie Skłodowski-Curie Fellowship. Welcome and thank you for agreeing to this.
Good morning, DK.
What is your usual work area of study at the University of Granada?
Well, I work on igneous rocks, so rocks that are related to magmatic processes, both that crystallizing at depth as plutonic rocks and erupted at the surface as volcanic rocks.
The main difference between those two processes in terms of at depth and at the surface, what are some of the main identifiers that you get?
Well, the main difference between those two types of rocks can be seen in the textures of the rocks, because at depth they crystallize very slowly, so the crystals that form have a lot of time to grow, and so they're much larger, maybe half a centimetre in size, diameter, whereas the crystals that form at the surface cool very quickly as the magma comes into contact with the air and form very much smaller crystals. So it would be a textural difference between the two.
What do you hope to achieve with this in terms of studying these rocks?
Well, what we're looking at in studying these rocks is the magma chamber processes. So we're trying to use rocks that have erupted at the surface and that we see brought to the surface that have crystallized at depth to look at processes in the magma chamber that tell us about how the volcano behaved in the past, and so how it potentially may behave in the future.
You are currently based at the University of East Anglia. What is the process of study the same, or what are you doing there?
Well, the reason that I'm based at the University of East Anglia is to collaborate with Professor Jenny Barclay and her research team. My research in the past was very much based in looking at magmatic processes in ancient contexts, rocks that were millions of years old. And what I wanted to do was change direction in terms of my research and look at magmatic processes in a much more recent active volcanic context. So that was why I contacted Jenny Barclay and working with her to look at this research in a way that's much more socially relevant, that has some impact on, the environment, how people live in regions close to volcanoes.
The Marie Skłodowski-Curie Fellowship, it also supports cooperation between industry and academia and innovative training. Do you see the work that you're doing impacting people now, as opposed to just wondering what happened in the past?
Yes, definitely. I mean, this for me has been very much a training fellowship. We're not actively seeking links with industry as part of this work. I mean, there are collaborations that could potentially be developed, but it's very much changing direction, establishing new collaborations that will continue beyond the lifetime of the fellowship, collecting samples that can be worked on in years to come. So that's my main aim with this work, to look forward to the future and look at how this potentially can be used in a social context, the research.
Before Jenny Barclay, who is known in Montserrat with regard to volcanology, was Montserrat ever on your radar?
Well, of course, because it's a British overseas territory. When the eruptions were going on, I mean, I was working as a geologist at that time. It was in the news in the UK, so yes, of course, I knew about the activity here. It was of great interest to us.
Itemize the process. What are the steps that took place for you to actually be here in Montserrat at the MVO?
Well, it started quite a long time ago. Back in 2016, I wrote a project proposal, and as part of that, talking to Jenny Barclay, she suggested that it would be useful to have some experience actually looking at how volcanoes are monitored, what the science is that's done in terms of volcanic observatories. So she suggested, because of her contacts here in Montserrat, to contact the director, who's Roderick Stewart at that point. He agreed to have us stay as part of the fellowship, and then when the fellowship was, I was fortunate that it was funded, I was then in contact with Roderick and also Richie Robertson from the Seismic Research Centre down in Trinidad to arrange the visit here. Other people that I was in contact with included Victoria Miller, because I was very interested to see how the science is actually put into practice in terms of risk and hazard assessment, and also with Adam Stinton, who I met when I came here, who's been explaining to me how the GIS systems are used to map dome processes, to map the actual volcanic deposits that can be then fed into risk and hazard assessment.
Reading about Montserrat in the papers, hearing about it in the news, seeing reports, what was your initial reaction when you got here?
My initial reaction when I saw the volcano was I was surprised by how large it was, how the size of the actual volcanic edifice, and also the deposits that could be seen quite clearly and very fresh around the area was something that really made me stop and almost, took my breath away, the impression that it gave.
Coming to Montserrat, your aim was threefold. Itemize that for me, please.
It was to find out about the work that the scientists do at volcanic observatories monitoring the activity. It was to participate and help with the presentation of the Mountain Aglow exhibit, and then it was to collect samples in the field for my work on zircon, a mineral that we use for dating igneous rocks.
How does that dating take place?
The dating takes place in that the zircon crystals form in the magma when it cools below around 900 degrees centigrade, and the structure is such that it's very resistant both chemically and physically, so it can stay, once it's crystallized, it can stay within the magma for long periods, thousands, millions of years. We go through a process of crushing and separating the rock to obtain the zircon, and then it's dated by radiometric means. The uranium that's taken into the zircon structure decays to lead, and we measure the ratios of these two elements, and that helps us to know, that permits us to know how long it's been since the zircon crystallized. So that can tell us about when magma was present in the magmatic system. It can tell us about the composition of the magma, the source of the magma, and how that zircon has been recycled over time within the magmatic processes.
Using that information, do you try to forecast?
No, I don't try to forecast. What I try to do is characterize the past magmatic processes, to think about that in relation to the deposits that have been formed related to the volcano. And that's information that potentially could be useful to characterize the behavior of the volcano over long periods, thousands, millions of years.
The period of time that you came to Montserrat, to MVO, was an interesting one because it allowed you to do certain things. You were also part of the team to bring over the Disasters Past project. What was that experience like?
That was a really positive experience for me, to actually be involved in an outreach project that had been done in collaboration with the local community, the people that were affected by the volcanic activity that took place from 1995 to 2010, through a series of interviews, taping calypso, photographs. The researchers that took the project forward, Jenny, Teresa, Amijos, and others from the UEA, I felt really positive to have the people that had been affected by the disaster's voice in hearing, what the impact was for them in terms of the evacuations, in terms of the people that stayed on island. So it gave me very much more insight into how volcanic activity can affect everyday lives of people that are living in these regions.
Were you able to interact with any of the individuals on island after they looked at the exhibit?
Yes, I was at the literary festival and I was speaking to local people there, and also the display was up for a week at the school, so I was speaking to the teachers and also the students there. And it was interesting that the young people, many of them were quite interested in the before and after photographs. I don't think that they'd really appreciated the difference between those two contexts, before and after the volcanic activity. And also hearing about the effect it had on people, families leaving. That was really quite upsetting in a way, but it was it was really positive for me to see how in one way our research can be related to something that people are dealing with in terms of their everyday lives.
Speaking about research, you were also able to sit in on the Scientific Advisory Committee meeting.
That was really very interesting, and I was very fortunate that I was allowed to observe in those meetings. And the structure was that the first day of the meetings, the MVO staff presented their research of what had been going on over the last 6 months, year, and then the second day there was more sort of interpretive planning of what might be happening in terms of the observations and the data that had been collected. So that again was very interesting to see how science is translated into policy in terms of what's going on at the observatory.
Being in the SAC or interacting with the exhibit, did that colour your perception in the field when you were doing your research?
It certainly made me feel that it was very important to make the most of my time on island. In addition to sitting in on the SAC and the exhibit, one of my other aims for this project, as you just mentioned, was to collect volcanic rock samples to continue the research, dating and looking at processes. And so I really felt that I had to take this opportunity to collect as many samples as I could so that I can work on these rocks going forward in the future. So it brought home to me the importance of the research that we're doing.
Without going into dating the samples that you have, what are some of the things that you realized or were apparent to you in the field?
One of the things that was really apparent was how fresh a lot of the rocks are. Despite being in a tropical climate, we were down in Plymouth collecting some of the pumice samples, and they really were, the glass was so fresh, it was looked amazing. I'd never seen samples so clear. Other things that were apparent from the samples was the variety of activity that's happened on island. I was looking at lava domes in the north of the island. I was out in the field with Adam Stinton. We collected samples from Silver Hills. Then I was using work from previous researchers such as Maya Cousins in Central Hills to collect samples of pumice that had been erupted at that time. So, activity that's really quite different from the lava domes, effusive activity, explosive activity, and also a range of compositions. I wasn't able to get down to South Soufriere Hills, but Thomas Christopher has shown me and given me some samples from there. And again, those samples of lavas from there are compositionally quite different from what we saw in the centre and north of the island. So it's the thing that surprised me most for such a small island, the variety of compositions and styles of eruption.
Asking about your experiences in the field and looking at your face lighting up, talking about how fresh some of the samples were, who do you think are some of the students that can benefit from studying on-site in Montserrat?
I think it would be an amazing opportunity for all geology students to come to Montserrat to see the volcanic magmatic activity here. In fact, I was talking to Adam when we were in the field about whether student groups do come, and he was telling me that there's a group coming from the States, I think, some point next year. I suppose a limitation would be in terms of cost for particularly European groups to come, but I think it would be of benefit for all geology students, undergraduates, master students, PhD students, professors. It's an amazing natural laboratory that you've got here in such a small space, such variety. It makes fieldwork logistically more simple, yes. But also to see the deposits in relation to each other as well, the lavas in relation to the explosive pumice deposits, etc. I mean, it's very, very interesting to see it all in context, placed together.
I like the fact that you're talking about seeing, because as opposed to just being on the ground, you were also in a helicopter. What was that like?
Yeah, that was an amazing experience. I was really fortunate that on the last day of the helicopter activity and support here on the island, when all the science had been done, I had a flight back to the airport with the helicopter, and we took a little detour, flew over the volcano, flew over Soufriere Hills, and just to see the steaming fumaroles and the extent of the activity where the collapse had happened in 2010 off to the east of the island was incredible.
You've taken samples. What do you plan to do with them? Or is it just dating or more than that?
We'll look at the composition of the whole rocks. We'll look at the composition of the minerals, and we'll also plan to look for these zircon crystals to see if we can date the rocks using those. That's my three main aims for the samples.
Okay, we're hoping that those results will be made available eventually.
That they will be published, yes, of course.
So moving forward in terms, do you see yourself having to come back or wanting to come back to Montserrat to, I guess, build on the research that they've done thus far?
I would like to come back to Montserrat, yes. I had a limited amount of time in the field. I really just had a week in the field, so it would be very interesting to look at the deposits in more detail, log up through the sections, collect more variety of samples that really represent the compositional variation, collaborate with the scientists here. So yes, I very much would like to return to the island.
Now, you spoke about having a variety and a wide variety within, I guess, the small geographical space. Does time play a role as well in terms of some of those findings? Or what are some of the differences that you see?
Well, there are three main centres of magmatic activity on the island. So there's Silver Hills in the north of the island, which is the oldest magmatic centre. The oldest rocks that have been dated there are around 2 million years old. Then there's the central part of the island. Samples there are intermediate in age between the Silver Hills and the Soufriere Hills. And then we've got Soufriere Hills, the current centre, and some of the oldest rocks that have been dated from there are around 450,000 years old, with South Soufriere Hills coming in at around about 130,000 years. So in terms of the difference in magmatic activity, I mean, the activity over that period of time has been quite similar, but there is a notable increase in explosive activity, producing pumice-rich rocks in the centre hills part of the island. So that's, and then as I mentioned before, there are these rocks that are down in South Soufriere Hills that are more basic in composition. But in general, there's a similarity over the lifetime of the island in terms of the composition and style of magmatic activity, volcanic activity.
Now, you were here for a short period of time. Did that allow you to experience some life in Montserrat outside of the MVO?
Some. There was the literary festival when we arrived. That was very interesting to go to some of the events. One of the events that I liked most in that festival was the slam event for the youngsters, for the adolescents and teenagers from the local schools, where they presented a combination of rap, poetry, theatre and readings of novels for the public one evening. I thought that was really interesting. Been to a few of the beach bars, Isles Beach, and the ice cream store. What else have we done on island? Yeah, we've had an interesting opportunity. I mean, also the local businesses that are really beginning to come back to life. The Blue Art Gallery, looking at the work, the artistic work of Shan on the island, and the sea cotton weaving as well. Very interesting to talk to the people with the local handicrafts they're doing and producing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be able to, as you have done, kind of look at the hard science, but also look at some of the social aspects and have them interface with each other, because it can sometimes give your work a little more life or a little more meaning sometimes.
Yes, yeah, to get to know some of the local people or meet some of the local people on the island, definitely.
All right, well, I want to thank you and wish you best of luck in terms of your travel back with your samples. and the information that comes out of them.
Thank you very much, DK, for having me.
We've just been speaking with Jane Scarrow, a geologist at the University of Granada, Spain, currently based at the University of East Anglia, UK, with a Marie Sklodowsky Curie Fellowship. Thank you for listening.